It's really an area that I think is so important to everyone. Well, I know it's important to everyone who eats, so that includes all of us. So I hope you also end this conversation today by realizing the importance of this topic. So what do you think about this? Can we feed a future population of 10 billion people a healthy diet within planetary boundaries? Does it worry you? Does that particular question worry you? Yeah, it worries me. It worries me because we're not doing a good job of this currently. So there is also something that I just found out this afternoon is going to be happening within the next probably 12 to 15 hours. A global phenomenon that is going to be happening within the next 12 to 15 hours. Does anybody know what that is? Yes, sir.
We're passing 8 billion.
We're passing 8 billion. That today, sometime between now and noon tomorrow, I don't know. I keep watching the global population clock today, and somebody can look it up if they want, but I don't know exactly where we are. But that phenomenon is happening right as we speak. We're going to be passing 8 billion, which is a remarkable number of humans on this planet. So this is we don't have a choice of whether we eat. We don't have a choice of whether we drink clean water. We have to for our survival. We need to eat. We need to drink water. And in modern society, we need energy too. So those are kind of the three big areas that we need to be pondering. How are we going to do this in a way that allows for generations to come to be able to do the same? So there's a couple of big things in terms of our American food system and what's spreading globally that is of great concern. One is dietary well-being or dietary health. The nutrition, diet-related chronic diseases are on the rise. We know that. There's incidence of obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, hypertension. All of those things are on the rise in the United States, and the Western diet that we enjoy here in the United States, our dominant diet, is spreading across the globe. So these phenomena are spreading all across the globe. What's another big concern you guys have that relates to the food system? Somebody throw one out. I know this is a really engaged and bright crew because I've heard a lot about the others. Oh, I experienced a lot of others.
Space, like where we're going to grow all of them.
Sure, right. So the land upon which we grow it. And what happens is that we actually really annihilate really diverse ecosystems in order to use it for agricultural production. So we haven't been doing it in a way that thoughtfully conserves biodiversity, thoughtfully conserves the planetary systems that we need to be healthy going into the future, okay? And then we all know that there's that unfortunate reality of climate change bearing down upon us as well. So this is actually a picture of eastern Montana. I think this is 3 summers ago. Just look at that landscape. That's not supporting life. That's not supporting the ability to produce food on this landscape that, has historically been producing food for at least since the colonial settlers came into this area. And well before different types of food. So I want to ground us before we jump into kind of more detail. I want to ground us around some vocabulary so that you guys are familiar with it as well. And that is the term food system. You guys have heard of nutrition, right? And you've heard of agriculture. And you've heard of ecology, right? But food systems kind of, when we talk about sustainable food systems, we're at the intersection of many different things. So the most simplest form of the food system is from the point of putting a seed in the ground, growing the food, so that's the production. Where's production? Production up at the top. That's the beginning of the food system if you're going to be starting somewhere. Into what transforming the food that you harvest out of the field, so that's processing or transformation. Into distributing it out to those who are going to enjoy that food. Accessing the food. Where do you guys, I want to hear 3 different access points where you guys may access food or where individuals may access food. Yes, ma'am.
Rendezvous.
Okay, the dining halls, an important access point for this campus. What's another access point in Bozeman?
Farmer's market?
Farmer's market, excellent. That's a direct to consumer. You're face to face with the farmer. Awesome.
Grocery store.
Grocery store, a very, very substantial one in our culture. Where else?
The restaurant.
Definitely. And that's continues to be a growing food access point. Eating food away from home is becoming more and more substantial in our modern day. What about if you were struggling with food insecurity or didn't quite have enough money to purchase your food? Yeah.
Food bank?
Food banks, a really important access point for people who are experiencing food insecurity. So that's the consumption piece. And then of course, waste recovery. What do we do with the food that remains, whether it's on the field or in the grocery store or at the restaurant or in our refrigerators? And that's a big piece that we're going to talk about today.
In the house, just throw it away. In the field, they usually just leave it.
Yeah, often. But that's not a tenable solution into the future. And we're going to talk in more detail about that. So that's the simplest form of the food system. And I do want to make the caveat here that we have an entire degree program on this topic. So we're only going to be able to kind of touch the surface of many things today. But I want you guys to start pondering the different problems and solutions related to this topic. So down here, we kind of have what we just went through, you know, the production, transformation, distribution, consumption, disposal, that type of thing. But what I want you to notice up at the top is these things that are drivers or influencers of the food system. So among them, politics and policies influence our food system. Can anybody in the room think of a situation where a policy might influence the food system?
Subsidies.
Absolutely. And what policy in our country dictates how subsidies are roll out related to farms? You guys know what the piece of legislation is called? And I'm not looking at you two over there, who've taken many of my classes, or at least, well, you've only taken one so far, Scott. Okay, Lexi's taken a few. Big piece of policy, reauthorized every 5 years. Have you heard of the Farm Bill? Has anybody ever heard of the Farm Bill? Okay. It's a really important piece of legislation that oversees our entire food system in the United States. And yeah, that's where subsidies are legislated in the Farm Bill. What's another policy that might influence the Farm Bill, or it might influence the food system, or how we eat and access food? Yeah.
Maybe like FDA policies, like what can be approved to be eaten.
Absolutely. So our Food and Drug Administration, you know, they are in charge of the labels that go on the food. What is allowed to be said on the label, what's not allowed to be said on the label. The nutrition facts panel that you see on the foods, that's all legislated, or those policies come down through the FDA. So very good, you guys got it. So another couple of additional drivers, certainly culture is a driver. If you think about food systems across the globe, they don't look the same across the globe because culture has a huge influence on what that food system looks like around the globe. So these are just many of those different aspects. So just to kind of ground you around the whole food system. So when we talk about sustainable food systems, we talk about those 3 pillars of sustainability. How many of you have never heard of the 3 pillars of sustainability? Raise your hand. Okay, that's all right. The 3 pillars of sustainability are social, economic, and environmental. You'll hear that whenever you hear when we start talking about sustainability, whether it's about food, whether it's about energy, whether it's about social equity, all of these things. Those are the 3 pillars of sustainability. So when it comes to the food system, the social aspects of sustainability are, is this food system supporting the well-being of humans? Humans who are eating the food, humans who are working along the food value chain. That's some of the aspects of social sustainability. Is it an equitable food system? Does everybody have access to a healthy diet? No, not really. It's not at this point. And is it socially responsible? Probably not right now. Environmentally, are we efficiently using natural resources? Currently, we're going to dig into that a bit more. And then economic, are we accounting for all of the costs appropriately within this food system? And we'll dig in a little bit more about that as well. All right, here's a quiz, your first quiz of the day. Who's that? No? Facial recognition software in the room? No guesses? All right, I'm going down a little bit of a down history lane right now because that is important for us to kind of understand where we've been, to understand where we're going, okay? This guy's name is Thomas Malthus. Now you guys know who he is? Okay, what did this guy do? Yes?
Like idealize the Malthusian trap and the, like,
Yeah, so what is the Malthusian trap? I'm going to put a graphic up and you can explain it.
So like at some point a society's population is on an exponential growth pattern, but their production of food is linear, and so at some point you reach a critical point where there's too much population, too little food. And this is like during industrialization, so like industrial revolution, and he was a British philosopher. So.
Excellent. I could not have explained that better. What's your name?
Gus.
Gus?
I only know this from Darwinian Revolution class I'm taking.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, well, he explained it perfectly. Way to go, Gus. Yeah, give it up for Gus, guys. That's absolutely right. So there's this inflection point that we as humans have actually reached many times throughout history. Malthus thought that we were doomed and that this was going to be it, that our population was going to exceed our capacity to feed ourselves, but we innovated ourselves out of it. And that has happened numerous times since Malthus was walking this earth, he was born in the late 1700s, died in like 1830s, somewhere in there. So that was about his era. So excellent. All right, next quiz. Ready? Who's that? I'm not looking at you two over there because I think you might know. I'll give you a hint. He won the 1970 Nobel Peace Prize. Yes?
I'm not sure of his name, but I know he revolutionized some strain of wheat that allowed it to be a lot more widely grown and I would say more productive.
Yes. And what's your name?
Rowan.
Rowan. Give it up for Rowan. He didn't get the name, but he's got the right idea. He's on the right track here. This guy's name is Norman Borlaug. Have you guys heard of that name before? He's known as the father of the Green Revolution. So the Green Revolution was a period of post-World War II. We started seeing famine in many places across the globe, in the Philippines, in India, in Mexico even. And we were tasked as humanity, basically, in the Western world, to try to help solve this problem of global famine. And Norman Borlaug was a plant pathologist, and he started doing these wheat breeding activities and came up with a variety of wheat. You can see it. This is the traditional wheat variety. This is the variety that Borlaug came up with. Really high yielding. It was a dwarf variety, so it didn't break over in the wind as easily. It was more resilient in weather. And what else about this one? It was very disease resistant as well. So what happened was we started spreading these varieties of crops that were, had been produced not through current biotechnology, but through traditional plant breeding. And we were starting to spread them across the globe to address the famine problem. And it did. That's why he won the Nobel Peace Prize. He was credited with saving 1 billion lives due to his work. Really significant person in the history of the food system. However, like all good things, there's unintended consequences of this scenario. And so here we've got the Green Revolution. These are the basic things that resulted in, a lot of the common seed being passed around the globe. So we're starting to see monoculture systems around the globe, right? The same type of crop grown in places where there had been a lot of diversity previously. Requirement for fertilizer to grow these crops as well. So fertilizer is made from ammonia. And so it's a fossil fuel derived input, as are most pesticides and herbicides. So we start seeing the whole food production system becoming more reliant on fossil fuels over the years, okay? You guys still with me? So again, the pesticides, genetically modified crop, we have more technology around that now, and requirement for irrigation. So we're spreading this technology across the globe to, stop this potential for famine across the globe. And then we start seeing the implications of this. Loss of biodiversity because we're starting to monoculture the entire planet at this point. Well, that's an exaggeration. I shouldn't be doing exaggerations in here, but we're spreading monoculture widely across the planet. We are really reliant on synthetic inputs for productivity, not looking at natural systems building the nutrients within the soil, okay? So this is really important changes that we saw through the Green Revolution and Norman Borlaug. So hold that in your head because this is kind of leading to where we are today, okay? So, as Rowan said earlier as well, Rowan, right?
Yeah.
Okay. We are we're going to be at about 8 billion between probably about noon tomorrow is what my guess is. You guys let me know if I'm off by a few hours. So as this population is expanding, we need to be looking to how we're growing food because we don't have a choice. We need to eat. And the way we're doing it now, which I refer to as our dominant food system, is not sustainable. And this growth in population, just to give you context, this is 1500s to 2016. You guys have seen this in other classes, right? You know how we really just kind of petered along at a relatively slow population rise as a species for quite a long while until we hit the Industrial Revolution of the late 17th century into the late 18th century into the 19th century. And then, of course, the Green Revolution kind of pushed us forth into the 21st century. So this global population rise is it's a relatively new challenge. And with that also, I just want to point out this other thing. We're seeing a shift in where the population lives. You know, historically, we had more of the people living in rural locales, and now we're seeing significant growth, much more rapid growth of people moving to urban centers, okay? And these megacities, population of 10 million or more, these are, currently we have 33 megacities, most of them in Asia. That's where most of the major or megacities are. Those are the really super large ones. But those are going to expand also. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we figure out not having humans spread across the landscape as much, but have concentration in urban centers as we gain more and more population. Okay, so I'm not saying there's one solution. We've got to think about this in multiple ways. So, back to food. Where are we growing food right now? This is from a National Geographic article that shows you the green is all where food that humans consume are grown. The purple is where agriculture is purposed for animal feed and biofuel. Okay, so that's like plant seed or ethanol, corn ethanol, that type of thing, or soy and corn for animal feed. That's the predominant input that's going into our dominant food system right now. So you can see there's, in the United States, we do, particularly in that heartland, which is the Mississippi River Basin in the United States, we predominantly are growing for animal feed and fuel in that area. And that's primarily because it's corn and soy in that part of the U.S. Okay? Another Nat Geo slide. What does this one say? This just shows you where it's pasture versus cropland. So this is important just for Montana purposes. You know, we don't have in Montana a ton of really great soil for production agriculture. We've got a lot of, marginal soil, and it's a semi-arid climate, so we don't have a tremendous amount of water coming down to irrigate this in a natural way. So we have a lot of pasture land here where it's animal grazing. And there's more water in the United States, certainly as you move east, you can see there's more cropland there. Okay. How many of you guys have thought about this stuff? What grows in the United States? Big four. Have you? Yeah. Is anybody like, whoa, this is kind of new to me. I haven't pondered this much. Have any of you guys ever read any books about the food system, like any of the popular literature? Like anything by Michael Pollan? Or what have you guys read? Just throw a book out. I love talking books, by the way. Omnivore's Dilemma. That was kind of one of the early books that really started getting people thinking about, well, why are we doing it this way, right? Yeah. Anybody read any other great books? Has anybody read The Third Plate by Dan Barber? He's a chef. So good. Has anybody read Braiding Sweetgrass? Oh my gosh, that book's poetry. And I actually have a slide that talks about that one, so I'll mention that one in a little bit. Yeah. Okay. So let's get back to today. I guess challenges is the wrong word here, but if we could drill down as far as what are the big things we should be paying attention to that relates to any aspect of our food system. You guys just popcorn. What worries you about what we're doing wrong in the food system right now?
Rising costs.
Rising costs of food?
Yeah.
Okay, rising costs of food. Yeah.
Slash and burn.
Slash and burn, so the management of the landscape. Yeah, so that's primarily just for, as we're looking to clear for animal pasture, we're slashing and burning forested land, complex biodiverse land.
Like with the banana industry specifically,
Yeah.
because of I don't know, it's some sort of thing that's killing all the plants. So
Yeah, there is a pathogen that's going after bananas, and because they're so monocultured right now, that's part of the risk, is when you have one strain of banana, it makes it vulnerable to a pathogen and disease. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Production and transportation.
What concerns you about that?
So my dad's a farmer.
Mhm.
We're kind of familiar with this. Not from Idaho, so like potatoes, that type of thing. The potatoes, like from being harvested to being actually shipped out, only about half make it, just because of how messy the system.
Okay, so loss in the
loss.
system. Okay, got it. And loss at that end of the system versus when it gets to the consumer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Subsidies for like less nutritious food.
Okay, so yeah, looking at our policy, and is it really supporting those goals of feeding people a healthy diet in perpetuity, right? Okay, yep.
Food waste.
Food waste, very important worry that there's actually a tremendous amount of hope around that one right now too, so we'll talk about that.
Topsoil degradation or nutrient depletion.
Okay, well, there you go. That was my first one I wanted to talk with you about. Soil. Soil is like, I never thought the soil would be one of my favorite topics, but there is a tremendous book that we read in my Intro to Sustainable Food System class, which is next spring if anybody wants to take a course called SFBS 146. Lexi and Sky and Cassidy, you took that one. Yep. So we read a book called Growing a Revolution, Bringing Our Soil Back to Life. And I never thought I would be so drawn to a book that really is just talking about soil, but it's such a great read. So even if you don't take my course, get that book. It's by David Montgomery, Growing a Revolution, Bringing Our Soil Back to Life. So I love this quote because it just really brings it down to like the reality of it. Despite all of our accomplishments, our existence depends on a 6-inch layer of topsoil and the fact that it rains. It's really that basic. We need healthy soil to be able to grow food, to be able to eat in perpetuity, right? And soil is something that we can help be healthy through the practices that we have in how we grow food. Soil is complex, and we're learning a whole lot more about it. This is a really rapid time for discovery around soil health and understanding what is going on underneath our feet. Have you guys heard about the soil microbiome? Yeah, so basically it's the microbial world that exists underneath in the soil, and it's just like honestly drinking through a fire hose reading the literature about the soil microbiome right now. There's so much discovery coming out on this. There's lots of communication between the microbes, the plant roots, the plants themselves. There's this fungi that exists in the soil, mycorrhizal fungi, and other fungi that exist in the soil, and they're all working with each other around creating this balanced ecosystem underneath the ground. That's what we're discovering, and that's what we understand maintains and keeps soil healthy, is having this very healthy, sustained ecosystem underneath the ground. the way we've been doing our agricultural production practices has actually been depleting the soil, not building the soil. So we're learning a heck of a lot about that. And what's another natural resource that we care deeply about other than soil? Water. Okay, here's our Mississippi River Basin. That is the breadbasket of America, where most of our production agriculture happens. And all of those drainages drain into the Mississippi River, come out in the Gulf of Mexico. When you start seeing the amount of agricultural inputs in the terms of synthetic fertilizer, pesticides and herbicides, all draining into this one river basin into the Gulf of Mexico, you can imagine there's the likelihood of having substantial water quality issues, right? So that does happen. We periodically get this hypoxic zone in the Gulf of Mexico where you get these algae blooms, and then there's fish die-offs underneath in this Gulf of Mexico there because of these significant algae blooms because of the crazy amount of nitrogen coming down through that Mississippi River Basin. So water quality is really important when we look at our food future. And then when we look at water quantity, we all know that, especially when we start looking at California, California grows what for us here in Montana? Almonds. I question whether it should, because almonds are really water-heavy crops. And is that the right thing to be growing in a place where water is becoming more and more scarce, right? What else do we rely on California for?
Rice.
Yeah, there's some rice grown in California. I don't buy a lot of California rice. What are the main things that we in Montana get from California?
Fruits.
Fruits and vegetables. All right, fruits and vegetables. It really is that Central Valley of California is the most major grower of fruits and vegetables in the U.S., but they're drying up. They're drying up. And are we going to become, how do we maintain resilience as a nation or even as a state here in Montana, as a community in Bozeman? Do we start looking at our own ability to produce fruits and vegetables here because of that? Okay, the other thing we talked about in terms of big concerns is ecological biodiversity. We've lost a lot of that with monoculturing. And you brought it up, Gus, around the slash and burn being a concern. We're losing rainforest in Brazil, and right there, a lot of it is policy driven too. There's not any incentive not to do that based upon the Brazilian government. So there's been just kind of willy-nilly annihilation of the Brazilian rainforest. And then when we look at our dietary diversity, that's another important thing. We've been talking about the environment and the ecosystem mostly, but when we talk about our own health, our dietary diversity has changed significantly in the last 150 years. So this was between 1903 and 1983, looking at the number of different varieties of various common foods over that period of time. So let's just look at lettuce. In 1903, there were 497 varieties of lettuce grown in the U.S. at any given time. Now, in 80 years later, this is only 1983, so now we're 60 years after that. No, wait, 83, no, do the math. 40 years after that. We're at 36 varieties from that 400 and something. That's nuts, right? So we lost a huge amount of diversity in terms of dietary diversity. And you can take any crop. So that's what now when we go to the farmer's market and we see heirloom tomatoes, some people are trying to bring back some of these old varieties and make them more substantial in our food system. All right, who brought up waste being a concern? Yeah, you did. What's your name? Trinity brought up waste. Okay. What do you think, and Trinity, you don't have to answer this, anybody in the room can answer it. What is the percentage of food that is wasted
1/3.
after it's produced in the United States? This is in the United States question, because this varies across the globe. You said 1/3? Who said 1/3? Okay. Anybody want to counter that? Okay, so we've got 1/3, we got 50%. I'll meet you in the middle. 40% of the food that's produced in the United States is wasted, with the majority of that being wasted at the consumer level. So it's like going to a restaurant, getting a big meal that you can't finish, which I get, you don't want to be uncomfortable, right? But then that food is wasted. Or, you know, you've lost your lettuce in the back of your fridge or your leftovers that you made last week, and all of a sudden when you pull them out, they've got a nice fuzziness on them. There's some wasted food. Don't eat it, by the way. That's not good for you. But this is the conundrum that we have, is that we just are so used to having excess and a lot of it. So, but this I find fascinating about where food is wasted in different countries across the globe. So let's ground ourselves right here. This is 42. We waste 42% of our food in the United States, North America, Australia, New Zealand. Okay, of that 40% of wasted food, 61% of it is wasted at the consumer level. You guys following the data here? If we go to sub-Saharan Africa, they waste 23% of their food, and the majority of it is wasted at the production level. Why? Yeah.
Well, they're wasting half as much, so isn't that basically the same percentage wasted in agriculture? If it's 42%.
Well, the overall,
40%.
that's not what I want you, yeah, you're absolutely right. They're wasting the same amount in agriculture-ish, but
Right.
we're wasting a heck of a lot more overall. You get it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get that.
Okay, so my question to you is, why are we wasting more at the consumer level, and why are they wasting more at the production level?
Culture.
What's that?
Culture. Just the
Maybe.
the throwaway.
Oh, that we
Throwaway
have a
culture,
very,
yeah.
yeah, I would agree with you on that, that we are, we're used to
Disposable.
abundance, we're used to opulence, we might not think twice about, you know, oh, I have enough, I don't need that anymore, I'll throw it out. But why are they wasting it? What's going on at the production level?
We maybe just have a more refined production and handling and storage
Yes!
process.
You totally hit it. Remind me your name again?
Gus.
You're Gus. He's not Gus.
He's not, yeah.
What's your name? What's his name?
Yeah.
Sam.
Yes.
This is Gus. All right. You're absolutely right, Gus. It's around storage and it's around transportation. Think about all the refrigerated trucks that are going through America. Think about the sophisticated storage capacity that we have, and think about the lacking infrastructure in some developing nations that are not having, don't have as much access to those refrigerated trucks or storage facilities. So that's why you see that differential in terms of where food is wasted. Okay, shifting gears. Oh my gosh, look how late it is already. This always happens. Shifting gears a little bit, you guys have seen all this before. This is around the human health side of the food system, right? This is not new to you, correct? That we have an obesity problem and that it's grown significantly since the 1980s till now. And it's really problematic when we start thinking about children. In the United States, having, you know, adult diet-related diseases by the age of 5, like pre-diabetic, high levels of obesity that are hard to turn back from once you hit that as a child. Hypertension showing up really early. So this is a big problem. And you can see, the only thing I want to say about this slide is that if you overlay slides around poverty in the United States, you're going to see a lot of similarity in the coloration between diet-related chronic disease and where people in poverty are living. And that's a problem. That's an equity problem in our food system. Healthy food is not equally accessible to everybody, irregardless of their socioeconomic conditions. So I do want to point this out. It matters to all of us because it's a huge economic, it's not only a social justice issue, it's also a huge economic issue. And this was, I forget what year this McKinsey study came out, but obesity was actually costing more than what the money that was, than smoking and alcoholism, and about the same as armed violence across the globe. So it's a big economic drain as well. Okay. Speaking of economics, and I feel like I'm talking too much, so I'm gonna start shifting here in a minute. This is just to show you that the farmer, and what's your name right there? You have a potato farm?
Lily.
Lily. So your parents have probably experienced this too, that the farmer's share of the consumer's food dollar keeps dwindling. And that's something to pay attention to as well, because if we don't have people farming, then we're really messed up. We need people on the land farming. I am going to go to this right now. We actually have a lot of hope coming down the pipeline. This is a report that any of you guys that are interested in this topic, I highly encourage you to look at. It's from an organization called the World Resources Institute, and it came out in 2019. And it is a menu of solutions to feed nearly 10 billion people by 2050. It's one of the most well-done comprehensive reports on not just stating what all the problems are, but looking at, okay, here's how we could approach this, here's how we could approach this. And the one note of caution I have for all of you guys is that there's not one silver bullet solution. There are just multiple solutions that have to go into play for this particular area. So these guys in this report broke it down into 3 areas that they need to be addressed. The first one is the food gap. It says, okay, if we're going to have 10 billion people by 2050, which it looks like we're on the trajectory for 9.7, by the way. I don't think we're going to hit the total 10 by 2050, which is good news. But if we're going to have close to 10 by 2050, we're going to need 56% more calories than we produce currently on this planet. Okay, so that means, how are we going to make up for that 56% more calories? Any ideas? Yeah.
Genetic engineering, like crops to make more.
Okay, so genetic engineering to increase yield. Okay. What else? You guys brought up one really big thing earlier. What percentage of food is wasted? 40.
Yeah.
Even higher than a third. It's 40%. I think that could really make some headway into that 56% more calories that we need if we really got a hold of food waste, right? Okay, so this is the second thing this report talks about, is the land gap. If we do nothing differently, and we need to produce 56% more calories, how much more land do we need? Well, we need 2 land masses the size of India in order to produce that 56% more calories if we do nothing differently than we're doing today. That's not a tenable solution. That's just not going to happen. So obviously the solutions need to be coming from other avenues. And then their last gap that they talk about is the current food system is a major greenhouse gas emitter. About 30% of all of our greenhouse gas emissions can be tied back to the food system. So if the third gap they talk about is the greenhouse gas mitigation gap. How are we going to feed 10 billion people in the future, at the same time reducing, not just keeping it steady, but reducing our greenhouse gases being emitted from food system activities, okay? So this is a real significant challenge, but they outline in this very thick report a bunch of solutions to address this. And that's just summarized, just summarize it. So what are some of the hopes? What have you guys heard about in terms of positive solutions around food waste? And actually, you're allowed to talk now, Scott. What do you guys know? What's happening that's good in terms of reduction of food waste? Yep.
Decreasing the size of meals.
Yes, absolutely. Reasonable portion sizes, okay? That's such a game changer. You see that at the restaurant level. Plus, it increases efficiencies for the food service operations too. It helps them save money. Anything else that you guys know about that's reducing food waste? Yep.
Like repurposing food that people don't want to sell at like the grocery store level.
Yeah.
Like if it looks imperfect.
Do you guys know that the Gallatin Valley Food Bank goes on food rescue missions around the community. Who has gone on a food rescue mission? I've ridden the van and gone to, Sky has as well. So basically they have a van, they go to Albertsons, Safeway, the Co-op, they go to every grocery store in town, and in the back of the house at these food grocery stores, they pick up food that's going to be, would normally be thrown into the landfill, but is still perfectly good food, and they bring it back to the food bank. And anything that is past, good date, they actually put in this compost thing. There's a pig farmer that comes and picks up all of that, so it gets repurposed to animals if it doesn't get repurposed to humans. So this is the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. You guys are familiar with the EPA. It put this out a couple of years ago. This is the food recovery hierarchy. In other words, how should we be dealing with food that we can't, or that may be wasted? The first thing is to reduce it at the source level. So buy less, buy more efficiently, buy more intentionally, so you know exactly what you're doing, plan it out. Second, feed hungry people first. So that food recovery network that they do with Galta Valley Food Bank is an awesome idea. Then feed animals. And then industrial uses. So can you generate methane from food waste? Yes, you can. There's a researcher here on campus that's just, have any of you guys ever had Roland Ebel for a class? Roland is working on a home methane digester for home compost or home food waste. And he's got a bunch of pilot projects at homes throughout the Galton Valley here, and they're generating methane from this food waste. And then of course composting, but you guys look how far down composting is. I mean, I feel good about composting my food, but it's really far down the food waste hierarchy. We should be really thinking about the things that are higher up on that as far as better options. And then the last option, of course, is the landfill. Some of the things in this report are like, how can we really improve food waste? In the Global South, improving harvesting techniques is really an important way. Where we see the losses happening at the production level, that's where we want to be doing that. Here in America, and the UK did this, change food date labeling practices. Typically that best by date, use by dates are not when the food is going to go bad, and people end up pitching perfectly good food early. So if you change that. Another thing the UK did, which was brilliant, was that they put a moratorium on like deals in the grocery store, like buy 2 get 3 free kind of thing. That just promotes food waste. And you may not think about that, but if it's a deal and you think you're going to get something for less, you'll just take more of it, even if you may not want to use it or may not end up using it. Other innovations are around technology, or other solutions are around technology. How many of you guys have heard of this concept called precision agriculture? Do you know what it means? Somebody explain what it means to me. Do you want me to? No? Okay. All it is that you're using technology, whether it's GIS technology, open source data, artificial intelligence technology, to just map out a very specific parameters of a field, and you're taking readings on where various agricultural inputs are needed. So you're not just taking an agricultural sprayer and spraying it all the same volume across the entire field. You're actually doing it very targeted to what's needed in a very specific section of that field. So you're using much less in terms of synthetic inputs. So that's certainly not something that that's being done in organic systems so much, because you're still using a lot of agricultural inputs. There are organic inputs, but I don't think precision agriculture is being used as much in organic systems. So that's really good, though. I mean, it's definitely decreasing the amount of these negative inputs, or these environmentally degrading inputs. Oh, this is a cow. And do you see the cow in my outline there? All this slide is about is cow burps. Cow burps are what gas?
Methane.
Methane, right. methane is a greenhouse gas, right? Cow burps are a significant contribution to greenhouse gas emissions from the food system, believe it or not, because there's a lot of cows, especially when you get into the dominant food system that we have today with these concentrated animal agriculture spaces, these feedlot type spaces. So some of the innovation is looking at how can we minimize methane emissions from cows. Some of it has to do, so there's things in terms of animal feed that they're starting to change up some of the enzymatic reactions within the cow rumen to decrease the methane coming out of the cow burps. But then also in managing manure in these concentrated animal feed systems, they're looking at some technologies around separating the solids, liquids. So there's engineering aspects of this. Looking at covered storage, digesters, that type of stuff. This was the one that was talking about the cow burps. I put it out of order. Spreading nitrification inhibitors so that the cows are actually doing less of that in their rumen metabolism. Feeding them, putting it in the animal feed, and then breeding grasses. So you can see there's all sorts of technology. And this is almost finally. Another solution that we've seen that we're starting to see is around policy. You guys talked a little bit about that. One thing that I am really excited about is this concept of national dietary guidelines that actually incorporate sustainability in them. In the United States, we tried to do this. Have you guys ever seen the My Plate? Okay, the My Plate is like the consumer-facing tool that comes out of our government. So every 10 years, I think it is it every 10 or 5? I can't remember, it's 5 or 10. We update our national dietary guidelines, okay? And that means, it's this group of scientists and industry people who come together and say, this is what Americans should be eating for good health. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily a perfect system because there's a lot of industry influence on it. But we tried in 2015, I believe, to get sustainability aspects into the national dietary guidelines, and it failed. They came down at the end and said, no, this isn't the place for people to talk about sustainability. It actually is, and it will happen in the future, but it failed at that time. But so we're starting to see across the globe, though, that other countries are embedding sustainability initiatives in their dietary guidelines. Sweden is one of the leading ones. They just have very simple dietary guidelines, but they're really kind of pushing forth plant-based diets as one of their primary things, because we know that's a significant thing in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Ethiopia just came out with their first dietary guidelines in this year, in 2022, and they are embedded in they have sustainability embedded in them. That you might think, well, Ethiopia, boy, they're really having significant food insecurity problems, which is very true. They really are. But that's part of why sustainability is so critical here. In order to be able to be self-sufficient in terms of their own food system, embedding care of their natural resources has to be part of that. Another great shift, and this is where braiding sweetgrass comes in again, is what we're learning from indigenous populations in terms of how to produce food in concert with nature is so critical. And we're learning more and more and more about this. How many of you know that at MSU, within the last year, we have a new initiative called the Buffalo Nations Food Systems Initiative? Anybody heard of that? Cassie, you have? Yeah, this is really exciting. It's indigenous folks from around the state are involved in this, and it's really looking at traditional foodways of Native peoples in Montana when we had the bison food system that was the predominant food system in the northern Great Plains, and kind of returning to some of those ways in concert with nature. This braiding sweetgrass, I highly recommend this for anybody who's interested in this topic. And I just have a couple more. This one I want to make sure we at least mention today, and that's if we're talking about truly shifting something as big as the way we produce and consume food, we need to be talking reality in terms of what are the true costs of the way we produce food. And right now, there is no cost that's really accounted for at the grocery store on the influence, the ecological influence of that particular food product. So it's those external costs. That could have been produced in a way that had really significant ecological impact, or the packaging may have had really significant ecological impact. There's no way to account for that. So that when I talk about the true cost of food, I'm talking about accounting for all aspects of its influence. I guess I'll end on this message here, and that is that sustainability is one thing. Sustainability is how we move forward in terms of generations to come, whether we can keep producing food and keep fostering good health among humans and the planet for generations to come. Resilience is how we respond to shocks that are going to be happening over the course of time. Like, for example, the pandemic was a shock that happened and it definitely reverberated across the food system. We saw the breakdown of supply chains. Everybody experienced the grocery store shelves kind of getting depleted. What a lot of people responded to with that is we need to be looking at different scales of the food system in order to have true resilience. So how are we doing in terms of our own home gardens? How are we doing in terms of our community's food system? The local farmers market, and do our farmers in this community have the ability to thrive and survive? What about the statewide food system, the national food system, and then of course the global food system? Every one of those needs to be working somewhat well, at least a couple working well over at any point in time, so that we can experience resilience in the face of shocks, whether they're climate shocks or pandemic shocks. So, last slide. We're building the airplane as we're flying the airplane. This is something we don't have a choice of whether we address the sustainability of our food system. We need to, because it's essential for our health and our planetary health. So, and we don't know what all the answers are to it now, but it's very important that we're talking about it. So my ask of all of you is that you just talk about this. You talk about this as much as you possibly can. Ask people what they think about where the importance of where they source their food or how their food is grown, and just read as much as you can. We all, eat, so we're all part of the solutions here as well. So that's it. That's all I have.